All right, well, welcome everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. As you can probably see, and as we indicated, we're going to record this presentation. It's currently being recorded. My name is Brian LaFale. I'm the supervisor of the RIPD's Municipal and Industrial Stormwater Program. Purpose of this workshop is to give folks an overview of the draft Mashapaug Stormwater General Permit. We want to give the public, property owners, and stakeholders an opportunity to learn about the permit in an informal setting where we can gather feedback and answer questions. This presentation it's slated to be an hour long with 30 minutes for questions and feedback at the end. So we ask that you save your questions to the end or enter them into the chat and we'll go over them at the end. Questions can also be raised verbally by raising your hand, and we'll unmute you so you can ask questions on the fly. As I said, we're going to record this presentation, and we'll also be posting a Spanish version of the slides on the website for those that need that additional assistance. So I'd like to introduce my team that's here with me today. Again, my name is Brian LaFale. With me today, helping with the presentation from my team is Jennifer Stout and Leon Lai. And also helping with this project is Maya, but she won't be doing any presenting. And here's our contact info if you need it after the presentation. So let's get right into the agenda. We're going to talk about stormwater pollution, the stormwater pollution sources within the Mashapaug Watershed, and how that stormwater pollution is impacting the watershed. We're going to also talk about and give you a little background on the regulatory framework for improving water quality within the watershed. Jennifer is going to give everyone an overview of the Stormwater General Permit and what's in it and what it requires. And then we'll get into the permit issuance process. This is the very first step in the process, this workshop, but there's a few more steps to go before we get to the point where the permit is finalized. So we're going to talk about that process and some of the anticipated compliance schedules that will apply to property owners that are subject to the permit. We'll also talk about available compliance assistance resources. We'll summarize sort of where we go next, and then we'll leave the floor open for questions, comments, and discussion. So without further ado, let's get into stormwater pollution and the watershed and why we're here today. So before you is a slide aerial view of the Mashapaug Watershed. Since we have probably a wide variety of backgrounds in the audience, I just want to talk about what we think of when we think of a watershed, or what it's really all about. So a watershed is sort of an area of land. In this case, it's the green dashed line that you see on your screen. It's an area of land when the rain falls from the sky, it lands on the ground surface. It either infiltrates within this boundary or it flows into one of the water bodies within this boundary. Water that lands on the ground outside of this boundary goes in a different direction. So within this watershed, we have three water bodies, surface water bodies, namely Tongue Pond, Spectacle Pond, and Mashapaug Pond. The watershed is 1.8 square miles in size. It's located within the city of Cranston and is also the city of Providence. Mashapaug Pond just so happens to be the largest freshwater body in the city of Providence. And within this watershed, it's a heavily developed urban area. Impervious surfaces such as pavement, asphalt, sidewalks, basically land surfaces where water doesn't infiltrate naturally like it would in a natural wooded area. That covers over 61% of the watershed. The watershed also has no known sewer discharges or wastewater discharge pipes that are directed to the ponds. The only known discharges to the ponds are from stormwater. So impervious surfaces take up a large percentage or make up a large percentage of this watershed. And what we know about watersheds in general and their in impervious cover percentages and how it relates to water quality is that there have been many studies, very practical studies, that show that watersheds that have over 10% impervious cover generally have healthy water bodies and are meeting water quality standards. Anything above that in terms of impervious cover percentage, generally those watersheds have issues. And in the watersheds where the impervious cover is reduced down below 10%, usually the water bodies will recover over time. So some examples of impervious cover and sort of how it looks within this actual watershed. Here's some photos. We got a Google Map view, aerial view of Mashapaug Pond with Spectacle Pond in the distance in the upper left-hand corner. You can see there's pretty large commercial properties within the watershed, very large rooftop areas, which are also considered impervious cover, lots of pavement, lots of sidewalks, lots of concrete. And in some cases, we have concrete or pavement going right up to the shore of the ponds. In the lower left-hand corner, you can see asphalt or pavement is running right up to the shoreline. So let's talk about why impervious cover is such an issue for water quality, why that over 10% number is a problem. Well, as you can imagine, when we have an area such as the Mashapaug Watershed that has so much pavement and impervious cover, when rainwater lands on those surfaces, that water runs off and becomes stormwater. That water is not just being discharged into our waterways through catch basins and other point sources, but it's also capturing a lot of pollutants as it moves along the ground surface. The slide that you're seeing in front of you sort of has an overview of the typical stormwater pollutants that can be found in stormwater and their sources. Examples are nutrients such as phosphorus and nitrogen, which come from man-made fertilizers, also animal waste that's in the environment, organic matter from leaf litter. Bacteria can be picked up in stormwater and discharged from animal waste, human waste, organic matter. And we also have some industrial pollutants such as metals, sediment, oil, and grease that comes from industrial activities, vehicles, rooftops, parking lots, etc. And lastly, the sixth example here is chlorides. Chlorides are applied in the form of road salt and sand during the winter months, and those can be washed off into our water bodies as well. Another issue that we contend with in our stormwater collection systems are illicit discharges. So we may have illegal connections of sewage or other floor drains from industrial buildings, historic industrial buildings that maybe people don't realize are connected to our storm drain systems in our water bodies. The last sort of drawback to all this impervious cover is its effect on flooding. So with climate change, we're seeing more frequent and more intense rainfall. When we have a watershed that has lots of impervious cover as a percentage, basically there's no place for that heavy rainfall to go. It doesn't infiltrate into the ground as it would in a natural environment, and it can lead to localized flooding. On the flip side, if we have a very dry period of time in our weather pattern, we don't have that natural recharge of our groundwater in a place where it's heavily paved and lots of impervious cover. And therefore our water levels in our water bodies go down, our stream flow is low, and that's not good for fish and wildlife. So how do we address these pollutant impacts associated with stormwater and impervious cover? Well, the Clean Water Act, which has been around for a little over 50 years now, we celebrated the 50th year anniversary of the Clean Water Act a couple of years ago. That sets up a framework for a water quality-based approach. So DEM is charged with applying this Clean Water Act framework, and we do that through lots of different staff here in the Office of Water Resources. The first thing we do is we monitor and assess our surface waters. If they're impaired or threatened or not meeting water quality standards, we list them as such. And if there are impairments, we look at figuring out what is causing the impairment and how can we reduce that impairment by reducing the pollutant loads going into these water bodies. We do that through developing what's called the total maximum daily load, or TMDL, and we'll get into that a little bit more in the next slide or two. And then once we've developed what those reduction targets need to be, we need to implement those reductions, and we do that through controlling point sources. And we'll talk about that in the next few slides. So as you can see, I have the first three boxes checked. That's because we've achieved or completed the first three steps for the Mashapaug Watershed. We're still in progress on controlling the point sources within the watershed. So as I said, the first step in this water quality based approach is to assess our water bodies. We've done that within the watershed. We know that Mashapaug Pond and Spectacle Pond are impaired for multiple water quality uses. Fish and wildlife habitat is impaired due to excess algal growth and low dissolved oxygen, as well as elevated total phosphorus. Fish consumption is impaired due to PCBs in fish tissue. That just so happens to not be a stormwater pollutant, but it's still an issue affecting the watershed and the community. And lastly, primary recreation activities and secondary contact recreation activities are impacted from fecal coliform impairments. And so what's the practical takeaway from these impairments? Well, you can see these signs that are on the screen in front of you. These signs, if you've been in the watershed, you've probably seen these signs before. These signs are alerting the public that, you know, this excess phosphorus that's in the water, excess algal growth, is causing cyanobacteria blooms, which is a type of algae that unfortunately is toxic for people and animals. So the people in the community around these ponds really can't use the ponds the way they should be, or the way they're used in other parts of the state. They're not able to swim or play. They have to keep their pets away, and we encourage them not to eat the fish. So how do we turn this ship around? What is the process for making improvements in the watershed? As I mentioned earlier, we have a process for calculating the maximum amount of a pollutant that the water body can receive in order to meet water quality standards. And that's through the TMDL process. The TMDL also sets limits on how much we can allow into a water body and what maybe needs to be reduced to help that water body achieve the standards that we set aside or set out to achieve. Within the watershed, we have established TMDLs currently. For Mashapaug Pond, those TMDLs that apply are asking for a 65% reduction in the pollutant loads in order to bring the water body back into compliance. And for Spectacle Pond, that number is 68% reduction. Okay, so now we've assessed our water bodies, we figured out what reductions we need. How do we control and manage those reductions? Well, we do that through another element of the Clean Water Act, which is a RIDEM permit. So the Clean Water Act prohibits anybody from discharging pollutants through a point source to a water of the United States unless they have a Rhode Island Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit, or otherwise known as a RIDEM permit. Now, RIDEM permits are not just a piece of paper that you get that says you can discharge these pollutants. They're documents that require you to comply with certain requirements to prevent pollution and reduce pollutant loads. Currently, we have 3 different RIDEM Stormwater General Permits that are in effect in our state. These same types of permits are in effect throughout the nation. So we're not alone in this implementation of these 3 permits. The first permit is our MS4 permit, which stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System Permit, General Permit. This permit applies to 34 cities and towns within the state. And it's basically regulating the discharge from the stormwater collection systems in our streets and our roadways. We also have 8 other MS4s that are not cities and towns, but act similarly, such as the Rhode Island Department of Transportation, QDC, Pastore, Department of Administration, Pastore Complex, among others. Our second general permit that exists today is our multi-sector industrial stormwater permit. This permit applies to certain industrial sectors, not all industry. Currently, we have 161 sites that are permitted statewide under this general permit. Our last of our 3 existing stormwater general permits is our construction general permit, which applies to construction activity. Basically, if you're disturbing land, we want you to control the discharge of sediment from those sites while they're under construction. And we have approximately 600 sites permitted statewide under that permit. Under the Clean Water Act, there is a provision called Residual Designation Authority. Now, this provision allows the DEM to require additional stormwater permits for sources that are not already regulated when we know that stormwater discharges are doing one or a few of the following: violating water quality standards, significantly contributing pollutants to surface waters, or are linked to pollutant reductions needed in TMDLs. Now, DEM or a comparable state agency can invoke this authority, or this authority can be requested by petition. And the reason why we drafted a permit and we're talking about it today is because we received a few different petitions over the last several years. The first petition that we received to invoke this RDA authority within the Mashapaug Watershed was from the Conservation Law Foundation in 2018. And more recently, we received a renewed petition from the Rhode Island Attorney General's office in January of 2024. The 2024 petition asked us to focus on several main elements in invoking this RDA authority. The petition asked the DEM to close the stormwater permitting gap by addressing the unregulated point source discharges in the Mashapaug Watershed from properties with over 1 acre of impervious cover. It also asked us to address the legacy pollution and water body impairments, which are well known. The petition included a request to promote green infrastructure to reduce flooding and the adverse impacts of more frequent intense storms. And lastly, the focus of the petition was to drive change in an environmental justice community which faces already significantly elevated environmental and health burdens. So we received that petition in January of 2024. In April of 2024, a little over a year ago, the DEM director committed to issuing a permit to address this petition. And Jennifer Stout is going to take over the presentation from here and talk about how we worked on that permit and what it contains and how we feel that it addresses the petition. So I'll pass things off to you, Jen.
Thanks, Brian. I'm going to be presenting an overview of the draft Mashapaug General Permit. As Brian mentioned, this permit is targeting point source discharges of stormwater going to the Mashapaug Pond, Spectacle Pond, Tongue Pond, and any associated wetlands or unnamed streams in that watershed. Our strategy with this permit is to achieve long-term phosphorus load reductions to the watershed using an adaptive management approach. And we'll be requiring levels of pollution prevention, good housekeeping, green infrastructure planning, stormwater control measures, and treatment, and/or treatment. Next slide, please. So what do I mean by adaptive management? Adaptive management is a long-term flexible approach that allows for adjustments over time. it focuses on continuous improvement. So you have to remember that it took a long time for the water bodies in this watershed to become polluted, and it's going to take a long time for them to get cleaned up again to the levels that we want to see. So the adaptive management approach allows us to roll out requirements in a phased manner. So that means that, we're requiring stormwater requirements, we're rolling them out in steps, not all at once. And this will allow property owners to make incremental improvements over time. And it also allows us to prioritize sites with the most impervious cover first in this first permit term. You can go ahead to the next slide, please. Thank you. So this image here is an image from our GIS map, which is available on our website. That's shown on the slide. Also on this website, if you haven't viewed it already, there's a lot of information that we're talking about today. There's this interactive GIS map that I just mentioned. There's also a copy of the draft permit, all the appendices that go with the draft permit, and the draft regulatory fact sheet that goes with the permit. So if you haven't checked it out, you can view it on this website. Getting back to the interactive GIS map, that is something that the public can look at. It's open to everybody who visits our website. You can click on any of these parcels and find out who the property owner is, what the total area is of the parcel, the amount of impervious cover associated with that parcel. So you might be wondering, how did we figure out which of these parcels are going to be subject to this permit? So let's do the next slide and we'll talk about that. So first, what we did was we downloaded the publicly available GIS parcel data from the cities of Cranston and Providence, and we overlaid that to our watershed boundary, which is shown here with the dashed line. And then, next slide, we looked at the impervious cover, which Brian kind of showed you earlier. As you can see by this reddish brown color, there's quite a lot of impervious cover. Over 61% of the watershed is impervious. So we kind of looked at both of those things, overlaid them on our GIS map. And then, next slide, please. Then we looked at all the parcels and who owned them, and we figured out if there were multiple parcels that were contiguous or adjacent to each other that were owned by the same person. We kind of merged them together into one parcel for the purposes of permitting this in this watershed. Then we calculated the amount of impervious cover for each parcel, whether it was merged or unmerged, and we selected all of the parcels that had at least 1 acre or more of impervious cover. So in the next slide, I'm going to just show you an example of how we did that. So you can see that this particular parcel has a lot of small parcels. They're all owned by the same entity. In this case, it's a business. And some of these are even over, a right-of-way or a street. So what we did was we just merged them all, because obviously each one of these parcels by itself is too small. But once you merge them, on the next slide, you can see that the entire, so this becomes one big parcel that will get one permit from us for this permit. I'm sorry, for the Mashapaug Pond watershed. This parcel ends up being 4.1 acres of land, 3.2 of which is impervious cover. Uh-oh, we're stuck. Okay. Thank you. So the same properties that are in that map are also listed here on this table. We've got about 64 properties total, 3 of which are subject to the multi-sector general permit for industrial stormwater. So they are exempt from the Mashapaug General Permit because we don't need to regulate those parcels twice. We've got 30 parcels within the city of Cranston, 3 of which have at least 7 acres or more of impervious cover. 27 have less than 7 acres. And in Providence, we've got 34 parcels. 4 of them have over 7 acres of impervious cover, and 30 have less than 7 acres. 7 acres was a cutoff that we chose because the folks that are the parcels that have 7 acres or more of impervious cover are going to have additional requirements. I also want to point out that this table is can be found on our website. There's an Excel version of this table on our website right underneath, I think, the interactive GIS map. And then it's also at the end of the regulatory fact sheet that is also available on the website. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk now about the requirements, the permit conditions for all properties. So all the properties that have, 1 acre or more of impervious cover. So for all the properties, we're going to ask that you minimize exposure of pollutants to stormwater. So that might mean that if you have any materials that you store outside, that you cover them or bring them indoors. It means making sure that if you've got a dumpster, it's covered, and that if where it's located isn't somewhere where the leachate is able to go directly into a catch basin. We're asking that you might want to minimize the salt, sand, and de-icers that are used on your property during the winter months, limit the amount of fertilizer and pesticide use, make sure that you're cleaning up your organic waste appropriately, etc. So those are different strategies and ways to minimize the exposure of the pollutants to stormwater and precipitation. Next, we're going to be asking for a good housekeeping program to be implemented. That will, at a minimum, consist of catch basin cleaning, if you have any catch basins on your site, and street sweeping for any paved surfaces on your site twice a year. We're asking that those things happen in mid-November to mid-December, which is after leaf fall, so that you can collect the leaf litter that's fallen. Studies have shown that leaf litter contributes to nutrient loads, which, as Brian already mentioned, can cause toxic algal blooms. We're also asking for another round of sweeping and catch basin cleaning during the month of April in the springtime after snow melt, so that you can collect as much sand and sediment as possible after winter sanding and salting. There will also be a maintenance program associated with any structural or non-structural stormwater controls, and also limiting the fines that might be moving through your property. Next slide, please. We'll also be asking all the property owners to try to minimize the impacts from major storm events. So as Brian mentioned, we've certainly seen our share of increased storm events, more intense storm events, and we all kind of just need to be a little bit more prepared for those things. So especially if you're near a water body and you're near a flood level, we would suggest that you try to store any outside materials above flood levels, or if you know a storm is coming, maybe temporarily move them indoors so that they're not subject to the storm or to flooding if possible. And there's a couple other strategies that are in the permit, but just taking a look at your site and trying to find ways to make it a little bit more resilient to the impact of major storm events. We're also asking for properties to have a spill prevention, control, and response plan, and make sure that you have staff that are trained to use things like that, so so that you can quickly clean up a spill should it happen. Try to prevent it from reaching a water body or into a catch basin. We want to try to clean that up as soon as possible, and then also having plans and procedures in place to notify the proper authorities should there be a spill at your site. We're also asking property owners to implement erosion and sediment control practices making sure that you stabilize any exposed erodible soils, or if you've got sediments that are moving across your site, try to contain them, prevent them from moving into catch basins, prevent them from going into the water bodies using erosion and sediment control practices. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to move on to the additional requirements that only affect the properties that have 7 or more acres of impervious cover. Okay, so one of the things that the parcels that have the most amount of impervious cover are going to be required to do is to develop a written stormwater management plan, or what we call a SWMP. What is a stormwater management plan? It's a site-specific document that identifies pollution sources and outlines how stormwater will be managed on the property to protect water quality. So what should be included in a SWMP? Basically, there's a few things. First thing is you want to identify and name a pollution prevention team. So it's anybody who's associated with your site who is going to be responsible for implementing the stormwater control measures, whether it's catch basin cleaning, sweeping, making sure that these things get done. So you want to make sure that your SWMP actually names those people. The next thing we're asking for is a site description and a map that's showing the land use of your property, any drainage patterns, impervious areas, stormwater features that are existing on your site, whether that's a catch basin or a pipe or an outlet, outfall, or maybe it's an actual stormwater control unit, whether it's underground or above ground, whatever it is, put it on the map, put it in the SWMP. We're also asking you to identify any pollution sources, such as dumpsters or fueling areas, etc., and have schedules for inspection and maintenance of this, at least the inspections, sweeping, and catch basin cleaning that we just talked about. I will also point out that the SWMP is something that needs to be developed and submitted with the permit application. So that, just keep that in mind, that needs to come in at the very beginning. Thank you. So I pointed out that we are focusing on phosphorus in this permit. And why are we focusing on phosphorus reduction? Well, one, as Brian pointed out already, phosphorus is a key pollutant in this watershed. It leads to excess algal growth, low dissolved oxygen, harms aquatic life, and obviously it limits the use of the ponds recreationally. But it's also been shown to be an indicator parameter. We can use it to establish load reduction targets and treatment credits, but it's also understood that if you're reducing the amount of phosphorus going into the water bodies, you will also be reducing other pollutants such as fecal coliform, suspended solids, organic matter. Generally speaking, it's sort of acting like that indicator. We've got the TMDL documents that have already established phosphorus load reduction targets. As Brian mentioned earlier, Mashapaug Pond reduction is 65%, Spectacle Pond is 68%, and Tongue Pond, though it's actually unassessed at the moment and doesn't have its own individual TMDL, it feeds into Spectacle Pond, so we assigned it, or we applied the same pollution reduction for Tongue Pond at 68%. So next, I'm going to talk about the other things. So how do we make sure that we're reducing the phosphorus to the adequate amount? Another thing that the 7+ acre impervious cover sites are going to be required to do is develop a written stormwater control plan, or an SCP. What's a stormwater control plan? It's a written document that explains how the property will meet its phosphorus pollutant load reduction target using approved structural and non-structural control measures. Basically, it's a document that you're basically going to look at your site and say, these are the things that we have existing on our site that we can use to reduce phosphorus. We might need to propose a stormwater retrofit BMP, or we may need to propose a new stormwater control, either whether it's structural or non-structural. And this document will help the permittee and us figure out, all right, you've got to, by the end of this first permit term, you're going to need to show us that you are reducing your phosphorus load by 30% of your responsible target. It will also have calculations showing the amount of treatment credits for existing and proposed stormwater controls, and there are methodologies for estimating pollution reduction credits that are available in the appendices of the permit. Again, that's on our website, so if you want to take a look at that, it's already available for you to view. The SCP will also be needing to have a schedule for implementation and installation of proposed treatment. And as always, if there needs to be maintenance involved, because if you don't maintain your stormwater controls, not only are they not effective, but we can't give you credit for pollution reduction. We can't give you the pollution reduction credit for phosphorus. So next I'm going to talk about the rest of the permittees, or the rest of the properties that have at least 1 acre of impervious cover, but less than 7 acres of impervious cover. So for these properties, we're asking property owners to evaluate your site for opportunities to do some sort of phosphorus reduction, whether that includes reducing or eliminating impervious surfaces. Perhaps you've got extra impervious surface, or additional parking that you don't need. Maybe you consider actually removing that pavement. Maybe you improve stormwater infiltration on your site somehow, whether that's underground, with underground units, or maybe it's just, again, trying to direct runoff to pervious areas so that it can seep back into the ground. If you're right near the water bodies, maybe reestablishing or enhancing aquatic buffers, making sure that there's vegetation, especially if you're one of the properties that has pavement right up to the water's edge. You consider pulling that back, trying to put some plants there, enhance the aquatic buffer. That will help. Or you could also propose or look for opportunities to install green infrastructure or stormwater retrofits on your property. So we're asking you to do this evaluation and then report on it in your annual report, because this permit does require an annual report. And we're just asking you to evaluate opportunities and continually evaluate opportunities every year. And you might end up deciding to actually implement some of those, especially if you have a capital project coming up. You want to make sure that it's including stormwater control in like a capital project that you've got coming up. So I think that's all I had to say on that one. Yes. So I mentioned green infrastructure. What is green infrastructure? It's a design strategy that uses natural processes to manage and treat stormwater at its source, rather than piping it away and discharging it directly to surface waters without treatment. So these tend to be smaller. There tend to be more of them, as opposed to like a very large detention basin somewhere. Especially with a very urban area, there's not going to be a lot of area for large things. So it's a better idea to try to think about smaller controls, smaller treatment options, and green infrastructure is a good example of that. So we've got different ideas: bioretention units or rain gardens. There could be bioswales or grass swales. You might do a tree filter or a planter box with a curb cut. Maybe you do permeable pavement. Perhaps you've got an area of pavement that doesn't get used much, or maybe you want to make that permeable instead. I think the next slide also has additional examples. There could be rainwater harvesting with either a cistern or a rain barrel or something like that coming off your roof. You could consider green parking. You could consider planting trees. Urban trees are great. They help not only do they beautify, but they also help reduce the heat island effect, and they help air quality as well as water quality. And then lastly, downspout disconnection. So if your downspout right now is just flowing over your parking lot, maybe you direct it to a pervious area, or maybe you develop a rain garden and help your downspouts water it that way. So these are all just ideas. There's additional guidance on our website to give you additional ideas. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Leon Lai, and he is going to talk about the permit issuance process.
Thank you, Jen. Yeah, so we'll be going over the permit issuance process. So currently we're in the informal process right now. So this is the public workshop, which is today and tomorrow. This workshop is really just for permittees and stakeholders to just learn about the permit and give us any comments or feedback before the public notice, which is the formal process where we will be receiving comments. The public notice will most likely be around either August or September, so just keep an eye out on that. So after the public notice, we're going to be issuing the final permit. Before we issue the final permit, we're going to be reviewing all the comments from the formal comment period, and once we establish that, we'll be giving out the effective date and the application deadlines for that also. Go to the next slide. So we'll be going over the anticipated permit issuance and compliance schedule. So we split it up into two sections. So we have the small properties, which is the 1 to 7 acres of impervious cover. And we have the large properties that are anything that's 7+ acres of impervious cover. So we have the effective date of January 1st, 2026 for the general permit. 6 months after that, we'll be having July 1st, 2026 will be the application due date. A year from that, January 1st, 2027, that's when we're going to be requiring sweeping and catch basin cleaning. And then after that, we have February 15th of each year, starting in 2028, will be the annual reporting due date. So for that one, the first one would be for 2027. So that's going to be the annual report for that year. Then we move on to large properties. Same thing with the small properties. We have January 1st, 2026 as the general permit effective date. With the large properties, they have 12 months after effective date for the application and SWIMP that's going to be due. Also, during that time, January 1st, 2027, that's when they will also have sweeping and catch basin cleaning begin. Also, same as the small properties, the annual report will be due on February 15th of 2028 for the 2027 reporting year. During that time, February 15th, 2028, which is the end of the permit, or it's the end of the permit in the second year, the stormwater control plan will also be due. Then lastly, for large properties, December 31st, 2030, which is the end of the year 5 of the permit, the implementation of the stormwater control plan will be due. Next slide. So we have a few resources for property owners that they can use. So the one we're looking at right now is the Property Owner Guide to Managing Stormwater. This is a great tool for any individual on how to properly manage stormwater. You'll find in the guide, that there's a lot of different tools to show how to reduce stormwater impacts, as well as cost-effective measures. Also in the guide, this slide is talking about just knowing your site, just evaluating the current site, and gives you steps on how to do that. Next slide. This is also in the same guide that kind of just talks about how you can identify the stormwater on your site and how you can make change improvements. It kind of goes hand in hand with the slide above on how to evaluate and then from there, it kind of shows you where the stormwater actually goes and how you can treat it properly. So we have a few more different guides. This is more for professionals to use. We have the Stormwater Retrofit Manual for BMPs and stormwater control measures. We also have the Rhode Island Stormwater Design and Installation Standard Manual, which is also for BMPs and stormwater control measures. We also have the BMP Accounting, Tracking, and Reporting Tool, which is the BAT tool for EPA Region 1. This is used to calculate pollutant reduction credits. We also have the Rhode Island Low Impact Development Site Planning and Design Guidance Manual. So we have a few things for the community to help. So how can the community help? If you guys visit the website rhodeislandstormwatersolutions.org, we have a lot of helpful tools on how to improve the water quality in your watershed. Just simply by picking up after your pets or not overusing fertilizer, using your water wisely, and even trying to recycle rainwater. By doing all those things, we can try to keep everything out of the stormwater drains. Stormwater drains actually connect and drain directly into the water bodies, so we should avoid dumping or having any water directly go into that storm drain. Next slide. So a few next steps that you guys can take. So if you guys want to stay connected, we have on our website, we have an email list that you can sign up to stay connected. Everyone should be able to sign up. By signing up, you get a lot of important updates on the permit and any upcoming events, including the public notice when that's out. Also on the website, we're going to be posting all of our material. So this presentation, and then we're going to be posting the recording of this presentation along with the Spanish version of the slides if anyone needs that. During this time, we'll also be taking comments and feedback up until August 15th. So this is before the actual formal process, is more the informal comments for that. So if you guys have any feedback or comments that you guys want to give to us, you guys can email us at dm.ripdeesmashpaug@dm.ri.gov. And I will hand it back off to Brian.
All right, thank you, Leon. All right. So hopefully you all get something out of this presentation. I just want to thank my team for all the hard work they put in over the last year or so. A lot went on behind the scenes. I want to thank the DEM director for giving me the resources to hire staff like Leon and Maya, and obviously to keep Jen. Value very much as well. And the comms team, our communications team, for helping us build a great website. Hopefully you all have seen that and are getting some use out of it, and it's providing a lot of benefit. So without further ado, I think we'll open it up for questions. If people want to type them into the chat, we can answer them verbally. And then if people want to raise their hand, we can call on you as well.
I think we had a question already in the chat from Margaret Byrne. She was asking to clarify the intent appears to be to cover only those sources not already regulated under the existing RIPDEES permits. While a no exposure certificate is described in the supporting documents as a RIPDEES permitting mechanism, the current language of the draft Mashapaug General Permit only exempts facilities with an active RIPDEES permit, like an MS4, construction, individual, or industrial general permits. This raises the question, does a no exposure certificate qualify as sufficient authorization to exempt a facility from this draft general permit, given that the draft is intended to regulate previously unpermitted stormwater discharge?
Yeah, that's a great question, Margaret. We thought of that. and we chose to not include those no exposure facilities in our breakdown. Basically, those no exposure facilities, if they don't have a MSGP, I should start over. So those facilities that don't have an MSGP authorization but have no exposure, they don't actually have a permit. So they would be subject to this permit. And Jen, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's correct.
But Margaret, you could certainly send us that comment. We can dig into it a bit more, make sure I'm correct on that. And we can consider it before we finalize the permit for the public notice. I don't know if Joe Haberak's on.
No, but that's correct.
Yeah, so let's move on to the next question. Thanks, Margaret. Great question.
Yeah, the next question is from Cassidy McKee. They're asking, do you have any plans to actually elevate Tongue Pond, or not elevate, evaluate Tongue Pond?
Yeah, so just kind of looping back to that first question that Margaret made, Joe concurred, the no exposure certified facilities would need coverage under the permit.
Yeah.
Okay, so do we have plans to evaluate Tongue Pond? No, we do not. Our water quality standards group is the group that does that work. But we know that Tongue Pond flows into Spectacle Pond and then Mashapaug Pond. And we also know from our assessments of Spectacle Pond and Mashapaug Pond that Tongue Pond is very likely to have the same issues, regardless of whether we've monitored those conditions or not. But you're certainly welcome to submit a comment in writing after this event, and we can discuss it internally. We'll keep an open mind. And then if we still don't make that change, you can make that comment during the public notice. So thank you for your question, Cassidy.
I think the next question is from Josephine Benson. In the event that properties are operated by the same entity but owned by separate entities, would a no discharge certificate cover both facilities? Okay. So in the event that properties are operated by the same entity but owned.
Okay, so the way this permit works, unlike the MSGP we issue to site operators. This permit is going to be issued to site owners. So each individual site owner would have to submit a no discharge certificate. And if people are wondering what that is, that's a claim that the stormwater that, or the rainwater that lands on their site, if it becomes stormwater, they're making the claim that it doesn't discharge from the site. So it could be a site that is in a depression, and therefore, or they don't have a point source discharge. So that's where the no discharge certificate would come into play. And Josephine, yes, the different site owners would need to submit that certificate and make that certification.
Perfect. The next question is from Susanna. Will there be a formal mechanism for community members to report violations or sources of pollution into the pond once these regulations are in effect?
Violations of the permit conditions or just general, like, illegal discharges that are outside of the permit? Or both? Okay, so if someone is violating the permit conditions, I mean, we really won't know that for a few years into the permit. We're going to be tracking that ourselves, but certainly if there's something really egregious going on, we want to know about it. And you can call our Office of Compliance and Inspection and file a complaint. You can also send it to us and we'll try to find the resources to investigate it. And most of the time we are able to do that. If it's something other than related to the permit compliance, you see something going on, there's dumping going on, someone's dumping a septic hauler truck into the pond or a storm drain or changing their oil over a storm drain, let us know and we can try to address it for sure. That's something we want to know about. Thanks, Susanna.
And then just to add on, Joe Haberak also sent a link that people can use to report complaints or violations of pollutants as well.
Yeah, so that's the link to the Office of Compliance and Inspection that I mentioned. There's an email address and there's a phone. If you want to remain anonymous, you can do so. Sometimes we'll reach back out to you all the time and try to get more information, but you don't have to give your name if you want to remain anonymous. What is the cost of the general permit? So I'm not sure exactly what you mean, Stephen. I'm assuming you mean the application fee. If that's the case, the fee would be $400. That's the same fee that applies to all of our general permits. If I didn't answer your question, Stephen, just keep going with another question. All right, next question.
Yeah, the next question is from Diana. Will there be any available funding sources to implement managing opportunities that may be identified?
I would say there's no dedicated funding sources, but there are funding sources that are out there that come up periodically. I'm really not the best resource on funding sources. Maybe Joe can chime in, or Jen.
Yeah, we don't do, the DEM doesn't really have funding sources specific for this particular permit. Like Brian said, there's nothing dedicated. I know that the SNEP network, the Southeast New England program, has a website that they've got, grants that come out, but it's unclear yet for us so far whether, how that would work with this permit. But that's certainly, I think Elizabeth Scott might be on here. Maybe she could say something.
Yeah, and I think, there's been money put towards this effort. That stormwater property owner guide was put together with money. I think the DEM pulled together, or a SNEP pulled together. I wasn't involved in that particular funding process, but that guide was developed specifically with this project in mind. It doesn't help property owners necessarily pay for the improvements, the sweeping, the catch basin cleaning, the stormwater treatment practices that might need to be installed depending on your site. But those types of things come up and are available periodically, and we try to capitalize on them, and certainly we'll share those opportunities with anybody that's signed up on our email list or might be a permittee when those become available, so that you can take advantage.
Yeah, so Elizabeth, I did give you permission to unmute yourself if you want to enlighten us. At least I thought I did.
Maybe you can just unmute, or Jen, try to do it manually.
I can't actually unmute you, but you should have the ability to unmute yourself. Sorry, Elizabeth, doesn't seem to be working. Okay, sorry. Thanks anyway for being willing.
Any other additional questions? Oh, there is one. Go ahead, Maya, you can read it off. That's working pretty well.
Yeah, the next question is from Josephine. Will there be any changes to road salting within the watershed?
Well, that kind of depends on what you mean by roads. So if it's an internal road to a property, it's a private property, private road, that could be managed by the property owner. If it's a roadway that's owned by the city of Cranston or Providence, that'll be something that the MS4 Public Works Director would have to work on. I know generally speaking, there are a lot of efforts throughout the state to reduce salt usage through the use of brine, pretreatment practices. You know, DOT's making a lot of progress in this area. Certainly some of the DOT roadways are discharging into the watershed, and they're making inroads to reduce their salt usage through various mechanisms. So I think you're going to see that continue over time, but there's no specific requirement in the permit for that other than to encourage people to reduce the application of salt where possible. Sometimes, you know, it's just overused unnecessarily. So there's a lot of education that has to happen with the people that are doing that work. More is not always better for the environment or more effective for keeping the roads clear.
The next question's from Laura Maxwell. How will you gauge whether or not property owners are complying?
We'll do that the way we do it now for our MSGP facilities or MS4 facilities. We'll be reviewing annual reports. We'll be gauging how many people have applied for the permit, responding to those property owners if they haven't applied. If they don't submit their annual report, we'll be reaching out. We have sort of a enforcement process that we follow. Usually starts with compliance assistance and ramps up to issuing fines, which we always try to avoid. We also do spot checks, inspections. People will be required to keep records on site of their activities. We'll be doing unannounced inspections to gauge compliance. So we certainly can't get out to every site every year, but we definitely do spot checks on a regular basis. So we anticipate that same level of effort will continue under this general permit. Thanks, Laura.
And then the next question is from Roger Burnham. Will we be notified when old permits expire and new ones are due?
So when the general permit expires, we will make a decision whether we're going to reissue it or whether it'll remain in effect. The way it's written now is once you apply and get coverage, you'll remain covered as long as you're complying until we reissue a new general permit. So we'll reach out to all the permittees and let them know when that happens. We'll go through the same process where we develop a draft permit, have a workshop, share that information, what's changing, when you have to reapply to maintain your coverage when that becomes something you have to do. So, yes.
I just wanted to call out real quick, Allison Hamill and Elizabeth Scott both made comments about the SNEP network and available funding. Allison said that John Zwark sent an email today about available SNEP grants for stormwater planning and management and suggests that people sign up for the RIDEM Watersheds listserv. And then Elizabeth Scott said that the SNEP network website does have information on funding sources, but typically private property owners are not eligible for grants. I don't know if you, Brian or Jen or Leon, have anything else to add on that.
I wonder if that's on our website somewhere, Jen or Joe, or if it's on the SNEP website.
I believe there is a link to the SNEP website on our Mashapaug Stormwater website. And if there isn't, I'll make sure that there is.
Can you post it in the chat, Jen? That might be helpful.
Yeah,
Manage it.
sure. But
Without
before I
locking
do
up our
that,
Wi-Fi.
yeah, before I do that, I just want to point out that we do have as Leon mentioned during the presentation, we do have an email list for this specific permit. So along the lines of signing up for listservs or email lists, please make sure that you sign up for the one for this permit, so that way you can get email information when there's changes, when we go out to public notice, or any of that information. So let me see if I can get the SNAP network link.
So while you're getting that,
Thanks,
Jen,
Joe. Joe got it. Beat me to it.
perfect. The next question in the chat is from Elisa Richardson. Will wet weather sampling be required?
So Elisa, no sampling will be required under the permit. But we are asking folks to evaluate their stormwater infrastructure. If they have a storm drain network, we want them to evaluate it and investigate it for unidentified connections to that infrastructure during their mapping process. And if there are any illegal, unauthorized discharges, we want them to eliminate them. There are some allowable non-stormwater discharges that are allowable under the permit. I'll give you some examples. Well, just one off the top of my head, we like air conditioner condensate. You know, that's something that's pretty innocuous, but it is could be a discharge. So we have a list of those in our permit. So I hope that answers your question, Elisa. No sampling will be required.
The next question is from Cassidy McKee, kind of looping back to Elizabeth Scott's comment, asking about if there's funding available for nonprofits.
Yeah. So Elizabeth gave us a link for the umbrella program for SNAP. Joe had given a link for the SNAP network. And Elizabeth, I don't know if you have any information on nonprofits specifically, but
Whether they're eligible, yeah, for funding.
Yeah.
Right now.
let us know if you know.
Yeah. Yes, nonprofit orgs are commonly eligible. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Perfect. And then the next question is from Laura Maxwell. Does this mean that getting permits is voluntary, that the property owners you've listed are not legally required to get a permit?
No. When we issue the final permit, those property owners that are identified in the permit will be required. It will not be optional. They'll be required to obtain permit coverage to discharge stormwater from their properties and comply with the permit. We sent letters to all the registered agents of the property owners that we could identify, and we identified all of them. We got a few bounce backs, which we'll be following up with next week. But we did notify the registered agents of all the property owners already to let them know about the public workshop, sort of how to get involved in the process before it's finalized. You're welcome, Laura. Thanks for the question.
I think that's all the questions I'm seeing in the chat. I don't know if you guys saw that I missed any or.
Did anybody feel like their question wasn't answered? If so, just repeat it. And if not, I think we can wrap things up pretty soon, let you get some time back in your day. And we're still a little bit, okay, here we go. Still got some more time, so we'll keep going.
All right, the question's from Ella Ackerman. How is DEM notifying property owners? Are notices sent in the mail?
Yeah, so we send out a certified letter to all the registered agents, as I just said. I didn't say how we did it, but we did it by mail. Did it by certified mail so we could see who received them. And I think there was only a few bounce backs, less than 7 or 8. So we're gonna circle back with those owners next week. And
And we don't.
Go
Sorry.
ahead, Jen.
I was just going to say we don't have email addresses for anybody, so we had to use, snail mail. And that's why we're encouraging everyone to sign up for the email list.
Yeah, but we will be reaching out to property owners during the major steps in the process via mail, as well as making announcements via our email list. So our email list helps us get the word out. Eventually, when people apply, we'll have their email addresses. We can reach out to them by phone or email. But until they apply, we'll have to keep doing mailings when there's a big step in the process, like announcing the public notice, announcing the permit effective date when that occurs. And we also plan to, kind of encourage people to comply by reminding them of upcoming deadlines, upcoming requirement, dates. Say when the annual report is due in a month, we'll give them a reminder. It's due February 15th. Maybe we'll reach out to them in late, December of the year before. So we intend to really be available for our property owners to encourage them to comply. We want to support them in their efforts to comply. If they're successful, then we're successful. Most people do want to comply when they get permits. Sometimes they don't know how, so we're here to help answer questions. And I can't promise that this process is going to be easy for a property owner, but I can promise that our team will be responsive if you have questions. That's something we take pride in, and we are good at getting back to people. We'll get back to you within 24 hours or less. So if you're on this webinar, Allison's asking, does that mean our email is on the Mashapaug email list? I would say sign up for the email list just in case. We'll check on that. So I would say sign up because I'm not sure how that overlaps.
I
I
think
want to say yes, Allison, but to be sure, just sign up, please. Great question.
we'd have to make sure that the folks that signed up for this website, our webinar, all their emails are transferred over to that email list. So we can do that manually, or you can just sign up yourself.
Yeah. So what we did was we did the mailing to all the property owners, the registered agents, and then we also basically got together a bunch of emails of people that we thought were stakeholders that would want to hear about this, that maybe told us they want to be engaged, or we just know they're folks in the community that want to be engaged. And then we hoped that everything spread like wildfire through social media. We did a lot of social media posting as well. Will this recording be posted to the website? Yes. The slides will be posted. The recording will be posted. A Spanish version of the slides will be posted. It might be a few days, probably next week or a little bit later. I'm not sure when.
Yeah. It'll take a little bit of time for the translation to come through.
Yeah, but the recording we can get up fairly quickly, and the slides, depending on our comms team's workload, but we try to do that pretty quick. Thanks, Margaret. All right, I guess we'll do a last call for questions.
Thanks, Allison. Yes,
Yeah,
that's our link to our website.
Yeah, everything regarding this permit is on that website. So if you want to sign up for our email list, it's there. If you need to email our team, dem.ripdeesmashpaug@dem.ri.gov. That dedicated email address is on the website. So if you forget it, it's there. So if you have to remember one thing, remember that link Allison just posted. Keep in mind that dedicated email address just gets sent to my whole team. So don't email that dedicated email address and my team because we're just going to get multiple emails. So that goes directly to us. It doesn't go to some inbox that nobody checks. It just gets directed to us. So
Also want to point out that we're going to be giving this presentation in person tomorrow night at the Cranston Senior Center at 6 o'clock. So if you know anyone that couldn't make the virtual and they want to come in person, that's happening tomorrow night.
Okay, before we wrap up, because it looks like the questions are ending and people are thanking us, which we appreciate your appreciation. But I wanted to ask, how many people are property owners that are subject to this permit that are on the call? Anybody
How are they
willing
going to
to?
answer that?
I don't know, just say, yeah, I'm a property owner. In the chat.
We got a few hands coming up.
Okay, Cassidy.
Gary and Cassidy. Just two?
Ripta,
Yeah.
okay.
2 properties in the watershed. Okay.
All right, well, that's good.
Glad you made it. Thanks for coming and joining us today.
Some consultants, we had some folks from DOT, obviously, folks from SNAP, Elizabeth Scott Consulting, who else? Yep. All right, thank you all for letting us know that. I wanted to make sure we reached out to the right audiences. So tomorrow night's presentation is in person. It's the same presentation. So if you've felt like you got all the information you need, you don't have to come tomorrow, but you're certainly welcome to. We didn't have a sign up. We don't know how many people will show up, but we hope we get enough people to make it worthwhile. We get some good engagement in the community. Just as a final reminder, even though it's held at the Cranston Senior Center, it's not associated with the city of Cranston or the city of Providence. This is a DEM project, but we thank the city of Cranston Senior Center for hosting the event tomorrow. It's great to have that help. All right, well, it's 3:20. I'm not seeing any more questions. I thank you all for your time and attention. And I think we'll go ahead and end the meeting.
Thanks all.
Thank you.